Hi, welcome back to Health and Heart. Enjoy our new story today and don't forget to watch till the end.
On Father's Day morning, my father posted an invoice to our family group chat. 47 people, 3 generations, everyone from my step-cousins in Ohio to my great-aunt in Florida. The total at the bottom, $177,453.28. The description, cost of raising an unwanted child. The last line, my biggest failure, payment due immediately. That unwanted child was me. I'm Dakota, I'm 31 years old, and I work as a clinical research coordinator at Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse, New York. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment with my cat, Pesto, who I adopted 3 years ago from a shelter because his adoption listing said, "Not friendly, do not approach," and I felt like we understood each other. Turns out, he just needed someone who didn't expect him to perform happiness. We have that in common. My mother, Caroline, died when I was 3. I don't remember her. Just photographs and a locket my grandmother gave me before she passed. My father, Asher Keller, remarried when I was 5. His new wife, Jolene, came with a smile that never quite reached her eyes and a way of saying my name that made it sound like a disease. They had 2 more children together, my half-brother Wade, who's 24 now, and my half-sister Tamsin, who just turned 22. Growing up, I was always the extra one, the reminder of the wife my father wanted to forget, the line item that didn't fit the budget. I spent my whole childhood trying to be small, trying not to cost too much, ask for too much, need too much. When Wade and Tamsin got new clothes for school, I got hand-me-downs from a cousin in Rochester. When they went to Catholic Academy with the plaid skirts and the good test scores, I went to public school, 3 bus transfers away. When they got braces at 13, I smiled with my mouth closed until I could afford Invisalign at 27, paid for with my own money, on a payment plan that took 2 years to finish. And I told myself this was normal. I told myself my father was doing his best. I told myself the difference in treatment was in my head. Then came that invoice. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee when my phone started buzzing. The family group chat, the one we only use for holidays and death announcements, was suddenly active. I opened it expecting someone's birthday or maybe a photo of someone's new grandchild. Instead, I saw a spreadsheet. My father had formatted it professionally. Categories, subcategories, line items. 18 years of shelter allocation at $847 per month. Food and nutrition, conservatively estimated at $34,200. $12,000 for emotional distress compensation. And my personal favorite, $2,847.28 for transportation to school events I attended against my preference. He'd even given me a credit. Negative $54,886 for minimal childcare costs due to subjects' self-sufficiency. Apparently, the fact that I never asked for anything was worth a discount. The final line read, payment due immediately. Sincerely, Asher R. Keller, Father, reluctantly. I stared at my phone for so long that Pesto jumped on the table and knocked it into my coffee. I fished it out, dried it on my shirt, and read it again, and again. And again. The responses were already rolling in. Jolene sent a single emoji, a clapping hands. Wade didn't respond. He was probably at work, or maybe he just didn't know what to say. Tamsin sent me a private message, 3 question marks, and what the hell is happening? Aunt Beverly, my father's sister, wrote something about how maybe this wasn't the appropriate venue for family discussions. Uncle Morris read the message and said nothing. A few distant cousins reacted with shocked face emojis. Wade's wife, Kelsey, left the group chat entirely. 47 people watched my father put a price tag on my existence, and most of them said nothing at all. I noticed one line item that made me laugh, though the laugh came out wrong, more like a choke. $45. Birthday cake 2002. Oh, I remember that cake. It was from Walmart. Half price because it was a day old, and it said, "Congratulations, graduate," in blue frosting. Someone had scraped off "graduate" with a butter knife and written Dakota in its place. I was 7 years old. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful cake I'd ever seen because it was mine. Now I know it cost $45, and apparently that was $45 too much. I called in sick to work that day. First time in 3 years. I sat in my apartment and read that invoice over and over, trying to understand why. Why now? Why so public? My father is a lot of things. Cold, dismissive, capable of a silence so loud it could break your eardrums. But he's not impulsive. He owns a small appliance repair business. He files his taxes early. He plans. So what was he planning? I didn't know yet that my grandfather, Russell Keller, had recently told the family he wanted to update his will, that he'd mentioned wanting to speak with each grandchild personally, that my father had spent the last 4 months watching his inheritance slip away and decided the best defense was a public offense. I didn't know that the man I'd been told my whole life had abandoned me, my own grandfather, had actually been sending money for me every single month since my mother died. I didn't know any of that. Not yet. All I knew was that my father had just told 47 members of my family that raising me was his biggest mistake, and I had to decide what to do about it. I spent 2 days in a fog, not crying, calculating. Something about that invoice didn't add up, and I don't mean the math. This wasn't rage. This was preparation. But preparation for what? The answer came on Tuesday morning in a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was in 607 area code, Ithaca maybe, or somewhere near there. I almost didn't listen. I'm glad I did. The voice was old but steady, careful with every word. Dakota, it said, this is your grandfather. Russell, I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you ever receive my letters? Before we continue, please take a second to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and it means the world to me. Thank you so much. I played that voicemail 4 times before I called him back. My grandfather, Russell Keller, the man my father had described my entire life as difficult, distant, and disappointed in all of us. The man who supposedly cut off the family when I was born because he couldn't stand that my father kept the reminder of his failed first marriage. I had maybe 5 memories of him total. Awkward holiday gatherings where he sat in the corner and I was told not to bother him. Now he was asking about letters. When I called back, his voice was careful. Not warm exactly, but not cold either. Cautious. Like a man trying to defuse something he didn't fully understand yet. He said he'd been going through old paperwork, getting his affairs in order. He's 84, and there had been some health scares in the past year. Nothing critical, but enough to make a man think about what he's leaving behind. And while he was organizing his files, he found something that didn't make sense. He asked if I'd ever received money from him. Birthday checks, monthly support payments, letters. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. My father said he'd cut us off. There was a long silence on the line. Then Russell said 4 words that changed everything. I need to show you something. Can you come to Ithaca? Don't tell your father. 2 days later, I drove the 2 hours from Syracuse to Russell's property outside Ithaca. The house was smaller than I remembered, a farmhouse with white siding that needed painting and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. I hadn't been there in years. My father always found reasons to skip Russell's invitations. Too busy, too far, too complicated. Russell met me at the door. He was thinner than the last time I'd seen him, and his hair had gone fully white, but his eyes were sharp, accountant's eyes. He'd worked for the county treasurer's office for 42 years before he retired. He noticed things. He didn't hug me. We didn't have that kind of relationship. Instead, he led me to the kitchen table, where a single canceled check sat waiting. The date was March 1998. The amount was $1,200. The memo line read, "For Dakota monthly support." I'd never seen a penny of that money. Russell watched my face as I processed it. Then he said, quietly, that he'd sent one of these every month for 19 years. From 1998, when my mother died, until 2017, when I graduated college, and my father told him I didn't need help anymore. 19 years, $1,200 a month. That's $273,600, not counting the emergency requests. Money for braces I never got, summer camps I never attended, college expenses I paid for with loans, and 2 part-time jobs. I asked him why he never checked, why he never called me directly, never showed up, never made sure the money was going where it was supposed to go. The answer broke something inside me. He said he tried. When I was a child, he sent letters, birthday cards with money inside. They came back, returned to sender. He called the house, and my father always had an excuse. Dakota's at school, Dakota's with friends. Dakota doesn't want to talk right now. When I got older, he asked for my phone number. My father said I'd changed it, said I didn't want contact with that side of the family, said I blamed Russell for my parents' problems, for the divorce he'd had from my grandmother years ago, for things I didn't even know about. Russell believed him. Why wouldn't he? Asher was his son. Then, 2 years ago, something happened that started Russell wondering. Wade got married. Russell sent a $10,000 check directly to Wade as a wedding gift. The first time he'd sent money to one of the grandchildren without going through Asher. Wade called to thank him, and in that conversation, Wade said something that stuck in Russell's mind. "This is so generous, Grandpa. Dad always said you weren't really the gift-giving type." Russell had been sending money to that family for over 2 decades, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and his own grandson thought he was cheap. That was when Russell started looking through his records. He pulled out a box of old documents, canceled checks, letters, bank statements. The box was dusty, but organized. 42 years as an accountant will do that to a person. He'd kept everything. One item fell out as he sorted through the papers. A photograph of me at 7 years old, dressed as a calculator for Halloween. Cardboard box, construction paper buttons, a plus sign drawn in marker on my forehead. Russell said my father had sent him that photo with a note. "She wants to be just like you." I laughed, but it hurt. The truth was I'd been a calculator because it was the cheapest costume we could make. I'd wanted to be a princess. My father said we couldn't afford the dress. Russell looked at that photo differently now. He pulled out another document, a letter from Asher dated October 2002, asking for $50 to cover Dakota's Halloween costume. He'd charged my grandfather $50 for a cardboard box and some markers, and I never saw a cent. I wanted to see everything right then. I wanted to take photos, make copies, build a case. But Russell stopped me. He said he needed to be sure. Some of these records were old, and he wanted to request official bank statements to confirm everything matched. He needed to verify before he accused his own son of theft. I understood. I'm the same way. In my job, you don't make claims without data to back them up. But I also knew something Russell didn't. My father wasn't going to wait for us to build a case. He was already making moves. I found that out the next morning when I got a call from my brother Wade. He said he wanted to meet for coffee, just to talk, just family. I should have known better than to trust that. I met Wade at a diner in DeWitt, neutral territory halfway between Syracuse and the suburb where he lived with his wife. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, fidgeting with a sugar packet. Wade has always been the nervous one in the family. He's worked for our father's appliance repair business since he was 18, never had another job, never tried to leave. He's not mean exactly. He's just soft. The kind of person who goes along with things because fighting seems like too much effort. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was reaching out because he felt bad about the invoice, because he wanted to understand, because somewhere in there, he remembered that we used to build blanket forts together when he was 5 and I was 12, before Jolene made it clear that we weren't supposed to be that close. We made small talk for a few minutes. His job, my job, the weather, because apparently we'd run out of things to say. Then he started asking questions. Had I talked to Grandpa? What did he say? Did he show me anything? I wanted to believe my brother was on my side, so I told him. I told him about the checks, about the letters, about the money that was supposed to go to me and never did. Wade's face changed, just for a second, a flicker of something I couldn't read. Then he said he needed to use the bathroom. He was gone for 10 minutes. When he came back, everything was different. His posture, his voice, even the way he looked at me, like I'd become a problem he needed to manage. He told me he thought Grandpa might be confused, that he's old, that Dad had mentioned Russell was making things up lately, remembering things wrong. And that's when I knew. Wade had called our father from that bathroom. He'd reported everything I said, like a good little soldier. I don't blame him exactly. Wade has never known life outside our father's shadow. His job, his house, his sense of himself, it all runs through Asher. If Asher goes down, Wade goes down with him. He wasn't being malicious. He was being a coward. And sometimes cowards are worse. I finished my coffee, told Wade I had to get back to work, and left. I didn't tell him anything else. I didn't trust him with anything else. 24 hours later, I found out what my father did with the information Wade gave him. Russell called me, and I could hear the anger shaking in his voice. Asher had shown up at the farm that morning with a stack of papers, business documents, he'd said, things that needed Russell's signature for the family's benefit. Russell, being Russell, read every single page before signing anything. 42 years as a county accountant teaches you to always read the fine print. Buried in that stack was a document that would have given Asher limited power of attorney over Russell's financial accounts. Nothing dramatic, just enough control to help manage things while Russell was getting older. Just enough control to make evidence disappear if he needed to. Russell found it. He didn't sign, and he told Asher to get out of his house. When Russell called me, his voice wasn't just angry. It was resolved. He was done being careful. Done giving his son the benefit of the doubt. He wanted to see every check, every letter, everything, and he wanted to talk to a lawyer. But there was a problem. Russell's records were meticulous, but they weren't complete. He'd moved houses in 2004, and some bank statements from that period were missing. We could see the pattern. Checks going out every month, letters coming in asking for more. But we had gaps, holes that a good lawyer could exploit. Russell said he could request the records from his bank, but it would take time. 4 to 6 weeks for statements going back that far. We'd have to be patient. Patience is not my strong suit, but I didn't have a choice. Then, 3 days later, I got a text from my sister Tamsin. She wanted to meet, not at our parents' house, somewhere private. I was suspicious. After Wade, how could I not be? But something about her message felt different, urgent, almost scared. We met at a park in Skaneateles. Sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, Tamsin was pale, her hands gripping her purse like it might fly away if she let go. She said she needed to show me something, but I had to promise, not to tell anyone where I got it. Then she pulled out a manila folder. The label on the front read, Dakota Records. She'd found it in our father's home office. She'd overheard him and Jolene arguing a few nights before. Something about drafts, about documents that should have been destroyed. Tamsin waited until they left the house, then searched. What she found was worse than anything I'd imagined. Inside that folder were drafts of the invoice. Not one draft, 6, dating back to January, almost 6 months before Father's Day. Notes in Jolene's handwriting covered the margins. Add emotional distress category. Remove the medical expenses line. Too obvious, we made it up. Make the total less round, more believable. There was a printed email from my father to Jolene, dated February 2026. The subject line was, Dad's Will. The first line read, he's talking about meeting with each grandchild about the inheritance. We need to act before Dakota gets any ideas. And there, at the bottom of the folder, was something that made my hands shake. A letter addressed to Russell, dated 2009. The handwriting was Jolene's, but the signature at the bottom said, Dakota. Dear Grandpa, it read, please stop sending letters. I don't want contact with you anymore. I never wrote that letter. I didn't even know Russell was sending letters. Jolene had forged my name to cut off the one person who actually cared about me. Tamsin watched my face as I read it. When I looked up, she was crying. She said she always knew something was wrong with how they treated me. She just didn't know how wrong. And when she found this folder, she realized our parents had been planning to destroy me for months, maybe years. I asked her why she was helping me, what she wanted. She said she didn't want anything. She just didn't want to be part of a family that did this to people. She wanted out. I believed her. Maybe that makes me naive, but I believed her. I drove home that night with a folder full of proof that my stepmother had been forging my identity for 15 years, that my father had been planning this attack for 6 months, that I had been a source of income before I was old enough to tie my shoes. But I also had something I hadn't had before. I had evidence. I had allies, Russell, Tamsin, maybe others once they saw the truth. And I had time. 6 weeks until the bank records arrived. 6 weeks to build a case so airtight that not even my father could talk his way out of it. He'd spent 30 years convincing everyone I was the problem, the ungrateful daughter, the burden, the mistake. He was about to find out what happens when the mistake starts keeping receipts. Russell Keller is 84 years old, and he has been waiting his entire life to use his skills for something that actually matters. That's what he told me the night I brought him the folder Tamsin had found. We sat at his kitchen table, the same table where I'd first seen that canceled check from 1998, and he spread everything out like a general planning a campaign. The invoice drafts, the forged letter, the email about the will, and his own records, pulled from boxes that hadn't been opened in years. He looked at it all for a long time. Then he looked at me. "Your father thinks he's clever," Russell said, "but he's not an accountant. He made one critical mistake. He assumed nobody would ever check the math." For the next 6 weeks, Russell taught me what 42 years in the county treasurer's office actually means. It means you don't throw anything away. It means you cross-reference everything. It means when someone tells you a number, you verify it yourself. And it means when you catch someone lying, you don't confront them until you have so much evidence they can't possibly talk their way out. Russell still had contacts at the county office, people who owed him favors, people who remembered the guy who'd trained them 30 years ago. He called in those favors now. Bank records that would normally take 6 weeks arrived in 3. Statements going back to 1998, showing every single check he'd ever written to his son. We built a spreadsheet. Russell's idea. He said if you're going to accuse someone of fraud, you need your numbers to be bulletproof. Every check he'd sent, matched against every letter Asher had written, asking for money. Every lie documented and dated. The pattern was devastating. In 2006, Asher wrote that I needed money for summer camp, $2,400 for 8 weeks at a place called Camp Whitmore up near the Finger Lakes. Russell sent the check within a week. That summer, Wade and Tamsin went to Camp Whitmore. I stayed home and watched TV in my room while Jolene complained about how much electricity I was using. In 2008, Asher wrote that I needed braces, $4,200 for the full treatment. Russell sent it. I never got braces. My teeth stayed crooked until I was 27, when I signed up for Invisalign and paid $127 a month for 2 years out of my own pocket. In 2013, Asher wrote that I was starting college and needed help with expenses, $8,500 for the first year. Russell sent it, proud that his granddaughter was going to university. I took out $34,000 in student loans and worked 2 jobs, one at the campus library, one at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my dorm. I graduated with debt that took me 8 years to pay off. I finished the last payment 14 months ago. In 2017, Asher sent Russell a check for $1. The memo line said, "D is off the books." That same year, according to a credit application Russell's lawyer managed to obtain, Asher listed his savings at $847,000 and his annual household income at $185,000. He wasn't struggling. He was hoarding. Total amount Russell sent specifically for my care over 19 years. $341,600. Total amount I actually received. 0. Amount my father had the audacity to invoice me for $177,453.28. He'd stolen twice what he claimed I owed him, and he'd done it while making me feel guilty for existing. Russell handled the legal side. He met with 2 attorneys, one for estate planning, one for civil litigation. The estate attorney updated his will. Asher would receive only what he was legally entitled to under New York law. You can't fully disinherit a child, but you can reduce their share to the statutory minimum. Everything else would go to the grandchildren with me named as executor. The farm, the property Asher had been talking about inheriting for 30 years, would go to me. The civil attorney was more cautious. There was definitely a case for fraud, she said. The letters Asher had written specifically stated the money was for my needs. Using it for other purposes constituted misrepresentation. We could sue for the full amount, plus interest, plus legal fees. But civil cases take time. Discovery, depositions, motions. It could be 2 years before we saw a courtroom. Russell is 84. He might not see the end of a trial. The alternative was a settlement. File the lawsuit, make it clear we had overwhelming evidence, and negotiate a resolution. Asher could fight it in court and risk a judgment that would destroy him financially, or he could settle for a painful but survivable amount. Russell chose the settlement path, not because he wanted to go easy on his son, he was far past that, but because he wanted to see justice while he was still alive to appreciate it. While we were building our case, Asher was getting nervous. I could see it in the family group chat. He'd post messages clearly aimed at me, still waiting on that apology from certain people. Some of us understand gratitude, others never learned. I have receipts too, you know. He didn't have receipts. He had nothing but the story he'd been telling for 30 years. Aunt Beverly called me during this time. She wanted me to drop the whole thing. "This is tearing the family apart," she said. "Can't you just let it go? For everyone's sake?" She talked about how Russell was old, how Asher was his son, how I shouldn't make my grandfather choose between us. I thanked her for calling. I understood her position. Some people want peace more than they want justice. They're willing to let the guilty go unpunished if it means avoiding conflict. I'm not one of those people. The sweetest moment came near the end of those 6 weeks. Russell handed me an envelope one evening, said he'd found it while organizing his files. Inside was a letter he'd written me in 2001, when I was 6 years old. It had been returned to sender. Asher had never given it to me. The letter talked about how proud Russell was of me, how I looked just like my mother, Carolyn, how he couldn't wait to teach me to make his famous apple pie, the one with the lattice crust that his own mother had taught him when he was a boy. I was supposed to learn that recipe at 10, then 12. Then it never happened at all. I cried for the first time since all of this started. Not for the money. Money can be recovered. I cried for the 30 years of relationship my father had stolen from me. The birthday cards, the letters, the recipes and stories and small moments that should have been mine. That's the crime that can never be fully repaid. My father didn't just steal $341,600. He stole my grandfather. By the end of July, we had everything. Bank statements with official seals, letters with their postmarks intact, the forged note in Jolene's handwriting, the Dakota file documenting 6 months of planning, and Russell's spreadsheet color-coded and cross-referenced, which could make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Russell picked up the phone and called his son. "Asher," he said, "come to the farm Saturday morning, just you. We need to discuss what you've done with my money." For the first time in 58 years, my father didn't have a lie ready, because for the first time in his life, someone had checked the math. I wasn't there for the conversation between Russell and Asher. My grandfather wanted to face his son alone, man to man, without me as a distraction or a target. I understood, even though the waiting nearly killed me. What I know about that morning comes from Russell himself, and from a recording he made. New York is a one-party consent state. You can record a conversation you're part of without telling the other person. Russell knew this. 42 years in county government teaches you things. I've listened to that recording more times than I can count. It's 47 minutes long, and it contains the complete destruction of my father's carefully constructed reality. It started calm. Russell had the spreadsheet printed out and waiting on the kitchen table. Every check, every letter, every lie. Dated, sourced, and verified. I sent you $341,600 over 19 years, Russell said. The memo line on every check said it was for Dakota. The letters you wrote said she needed braces, camp, college money. Where did it go, Asher? My father's first instinct was denial. The money was for household expenses, he said. I was part of the household. It was a reasonable interpretation of Russell's generosity. Russell didn't raise his voice. He just pointed to the documents. The memo line says, for Dakota, every single check. You wrote me letters saying she needed orthodontics. She never got braces. She paid for her own dental work at 27. You said she needed camp. She never went to camp. Your other children did. You said she needed college money. She took out $34,000 in student loans while you had $847,000 in savings. When denial failed, my father tried manipulation. Dad, you're confused. This was a long time ago. Things get mixed up in memory. I'm not confused, Russell interrupted. I'm an accountant. I have bank statements with official seals. I have your letters with their original postmarks. I have your signature on every request. Would you like to see them? Then came the anger. I can hear it on the recording. My father's voice rising, losing control. She was a burden, he shouted. You have no idea what it was like raising someone else's mistake. Caroline left me with that child, and I was supposed to just pretend everything was fine? I did my best. No one ever appreciates what I sacrificed. Russell's response was quiet, but it cut deeper than any shout. Dakota was 3 years old when her mother died. She didn't choose to be orphaned. She didn't choose you as a father. She was a child. Your child, Asher. And you treated her like an invoice for 30 years. Finally, my father tried self-pity. His voice went small, almost whiny. I did my best with what I had. You don't know the pressure I was under. No one ever sees my side. Your side, Russell said, is documented in these letters. You stole from your daughter to fund your lifestyle. You told me she didn't want contact when you were intercepting her mail. Your wife forged her handwriting to cut her off from her own family. There's a long silence on the recording. Then Russell delivered the verdict. I'm changing my will. You'll receive the legal minimum I cannot deny you under New York law. Everything else, the farm, the investments, everything I've built over 60 years, goes to your children, including Dakota, especially Dakota. My father threatened to contest the will, said he'd claim Russell wasn't mentally competent to make decisions. Russell was ready for that too. I've had 3 cognitive evaluations in the past year, all documented, all administered by licensed physicians. My attorney has letters from my doctor, my banker, and my pastor confirming my mental fitness. I anticipated you'd try this, Asher. I prepared. Then Russell told him about the civil lawsuit. Fraud. Misrepresentation. The letters requesting money for my needs constituted a legal promise to use that money for my needs. Using it otherwise was actionable. Estimated damages, $341,600 plus interest plus attorney fees. Russell's lawyer had already drafted the complaint. You can fight this in court, Russell said. Hire lawyers, drag it out for years, watch your business get picked apart in discovery, have your financials become public record, or you can settle. Return what you stole to the person you stole it from. My father's response was a whisper, barely audible on the recording. You're destroying this family. No, son, you destroyed this family. I'm just showing everyone where the bodies are buried. The meeting ended. Asher left. And over the next 2 weeks, Russell did something I didn't expect. He didn't post anything in the family group chat. He didn't make a public announcement. Instead, he called each family member individually. Beverly, Morris, the cousins, the extended relatives. I want to tell you something about Asher, he would say. I have proof. You can come see it if you want. Some wanted to see. They drove to Russell's farm, sat at his kitchen table, and looked at the spreadsheet. They read the letters. They saw the forged note. Most of them left in silence, unsure what to say. Others refused to look. Aunt Beverly told Russell she didn't want to get involved. A few cousins said it was family business, and they'd rather stay neutral. The family split roughly 60-40. Not as clean as I would have liked. Not the unanimous rejection I might have fantasized about. But real families aren't like that. Some people will always choose comfort over truth. The ones who mattered, though, they believed it. Jolene's role came out during this period. The forged letter was in her handwriting. She hadn't just known about the scheme. She'd been an active participant since before I was old enough to read. When Russell's lawyer started talking about naming her as a co-defendant in the fraud case, she panicked. Within 3 months, she filed for divorce. Not out of guilt. Jolene doesn't feel guilt. She filed because she saw the writing on the wall and wanted to separate her assets before any judgment could touch them. My father had spent 30 years with a partner in crime. When things got hard, she ran. Wade's situation was more complicated. His wife, Kelsey, had seen some of the evidence. She confronted him directly. Did you know about any of this? He admitted he'd suspected something was wrong. The way I was treated compared to him and Tamsin. The way my father talked about me when I wasn't around. But he'd never asked questions. He'd never wanted to know. I just didn't want to rock the boat, he told her. Kelsey's response: "Your grandfather sent $10,000 to our wedding. Your father told you it was unexpected generosity. He knew exactly where that money came from. He knew, and he still took it." Their marriage didn't end immediately, but something broke between them. Wade stopped working at our father's business. He needed distance from everything that name represented. Tamsin moved out of our parents' house and got a job in Albany. We're not close. Too many years of being raised as strangers for that to change overnight. But we text sometimes. We're figuring it out. By the end of summer, the outcome was clear. My father had spent 3 decades building a lie about who he was. A martyr, a sacrificer, a father who gave everything for an ungrateful child. It took one spreadsheet to tear it all down. If this story has touched you, please take a second to subscribe and drop a comment. Your support means everything, and it helps me keep sharing these stories. Thank you so much for being here with me. Now, let me tell you how this ends. 6 months after my father sent that invoice, we gathered in a conference room at Russell's lawyer's office in Ithaca to finalize the settlement. The civil case never went to trial. My father couldn't afford the legal fees and the risk of a judgment. His attorney told him the evidence was overwhelming. If this went before a jury, he would lose everything. A settlement was his only viable option. The terms? $280,000 paid to me over 7 years, $40,000 a year, every year, until the debt was cleared, not the full amount he'd stolen. We compromised to avoid the uncertainty of a trial and the years it would take to resolve. But enough to matter. To make those payments, Asher had to sell his business. The appliance repair company he'd built over 25 years, the one Wade had worked at since he was 18, the one my father used to brag about at family gatherings, gone. Sold to a competitor in Rochester for less than it was worth because he needed the cash quickly. He also had to sell the house, the nice one in the good suburb with the finished basement and the landscaped backyard. Russell's records showed he'd given Asher $40,000 for the down payment back in 2003. The check memo said, "For Dakota's home stability." I never lived in that house. I lived in the cramped back bedroom of the old house until I left for college. But the down payment came from money meant for me. I didn't want that house. I just wanted him to lose it. Jolene's divorce finalized 2 months before the settlement. She took what she could, which wasn't much once the legal fees and the settlement were factored in, and moved to North Carolina to live with her sister. She and my father don't speak anymore. 30 years of partnership in cruelty, ended by the first real consequence either of them ever faced. My father lives in a rental apartment now, 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor of a complex near the highway. He's not destitute, he's not on the street, but he's smaller than he was, diminished. The man who sent me an invoice for $177,453.28 now writes me a check for $3,333.33 every single month. I deposit them without looking at them. The money goes into a savings account I opened specifically for this purpose. I don't think of it as his money. I think of it as mine, finally returned. Russell is still here. His health stabilized after the stress of the lawsuit settled down. His doctors are cautiously optimistic. He takes more naps than he used to, and he doesn't drive at night anymore. But his mind is as sharp as ever. He's not going to live forever. He's 84, but he's not going anywhere yet. He has things to do, apple pies to teach, years to make up for. I bought a house, a small one, just outside Syracuse, about 20 minutes from Russell's farm, first-time homebuyer. I used part of the settlement for the down payment. It has a kitchen with good natural light and a backyard where Pesto likes to watch birds through the window. I go to Russell's every weekend now. We cook together. We talk, we make up for 30 years of stolen time, one Sunday at a time. There are things I don't have. I don't have a relationship with my father. That's over. Not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet finality, like closing a door you never intend to open again. I don't have the version of my childhood I deserved. I don't have my mother, who died before I could form memories of her. Some things can't be recovered. Some losses are permanent. But I have clarity. I know who I am now. I know I wasn't the problem. I know the coldness I felt my whole life wasn't my imagination, wasn't me being too sensitive, wasn't something I needed to apologize for. I was right. I was always right. Last weekend, I stood in Russell's kitchen, helping him make his famous apple pie, the one with the lattice crust, the one he wanted to teach me when I was 10. While we worked, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a birthday card from 2001, my 6th birthday. It still had a crisp $100 bill inside. Never spent, never delivered. I sent one of these every year until you turned 18, he said. Your father returned them all, said you didn't want my money. I didn't take the bill out. I put the card on the refrigerator door with a magnet from a pizza place in Ithaca. I don't need the $100, Grandpa, I said. I needed you, and I have you now. Russell doesn't do sentimental moments. That's not his style. He just handed me the rolling pin and said, the crust won't make itself. We cooked in silence after that. Comfortable silence, the kind you can only have with someone who isn't going anywhere. While we worked, Russell mentioned that Asher had been calling him, wanting to apologize, wanting to rebuild their relationship. I asked what Russell told him. He shrugged. I told him I'm busy, got pies to make. Maybe try again in 19 years. I laughed. 19 years. The same amount of time he'd sent money that never reached me. My father sent me an invoice for $177,453.28. He called me his biggest failure. He wanted me to believe I was a burden, a debt, a mistake. But here's the truth I finally understand. I was never unwanted. I was wanted so much that my grandfather fought for me for 30 years, even when he thought I didn't want him back. I was worth $341,600 to someone. More than that, I was worth every letter, every birthday card, every returned envelope that he kept anyway, just in case someday I'd ask about them. My father's invoice got the math wrong. He always was bad with numbers. Some people keep receipts because they want to prove what you owe them. And some people keep receipts because they never stopped believing you were worth it. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. If you want more stories like this one, there's one waiting for you on your screen right now. Just click and I'll see you there in a moment. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, sometimes the people who love you most are the ones you were told to forget.